Hi, and welcome to another edition of Newsmakers Journal of the Vaccine Year. I'm Jerry Roberts. It is Friday, April 2nd, and we are joined by our all-star panel of top local journalists, Jade Martinez-Pogue, Josh Molina, and Nick Welsh. Thank you all for coming. And we begin, as we have every time for over a year now, with COVID and the pandemic. 100 million vaccines delivered across the nation so far. That's the good news. The bad news is that's only about a third of the population, but everyone's supposed to be eligible by May 1st. What's the situation in Santa Barbara, Jade?
So right now we have about 15.6 of our populations fully vaccinated. So it's going up week to week. I think last week we were at 11 when we did this, so steady progress, which is good, but there's also been more variant circulating. If you look at the results from the Cottage and UCSB sample tracking, 45% of all the samples collected since November have been variants of concern. And out of the 11 collected in March, 7 have been of the UK virus. So it's a very small sample size, but not very concerning.
Yeah.
Not too good.
And how about the caseload and is that plateaued? Is it going up? Is it going down?
Yeah, so the good news is it's not rising. We're not seeing the patterns that we were at in the previous surges, but it hasn't really gone down either. It stayed low, but not low enough to advance us to the orange tier yet. We haven't met the criteria yet. So once we do that, it'll take an extra 2 weeks to actually advance. So I think people are excited with the freedoms that they have now, but
it'll be interesting, in a couple of weeks after spring break. And we're going to talk about Deltopia later. So we'll see how that goes as well. The PPIC, Public Policy Institute of California, had a poll out this week. And I think the numbers are pretty close. It's about 15% or 16% of people said they would not get the vaccine in any case. Another 7% said they're not sure. So basically 1 in 5 Californians aren't going to get it. Do we have any sense from local public health officials about vaccine hesitancy or anti-vaxxers, or where does that stand?
It's kind of hard to track in the county. I know when the vaccines first came out, there was a bit of hesitancy even in the healthcare workers, which I personally find kind of odd. But I think as more people are seeing their family members get vaccinated, seeing their friends get vaccinated, it's going down a little bit, but there are still, certain groups who are really hesitant to get it,
But what's interesting in those numbers is that, the big concern initially was that, communities of color were going to be hesitant. And like in January, when the first survey took place, I think 55% of the African-American respondents were either definitely not going to get vaccinated or probably wouldn't. Now they're down to less than 30. But if you look at Republicans, 39%, almost 40% of Republicans say either absolutely no way or probably no way. So what we need to do is reach out with trusted messengers into the Republican community, because they're the ones who are really dragging their heels to the extent anybody is.
Yeah, the Republicans and the other large cohort is white evangelicals,
right?
And I imagine there's some overlap in there. But the president or the administration announced a new marketing campaign. They're going to have 275 organizations doing ads, I guess, in a full bore media campaign to try to get, more reliable messengers than just politicians, I guess. Is there anything We know about that, Jade, that might happen locally, or I think if Nick told people to get a vaccine, that would probably increase the number of those who refused. But anything,
we need a reporter to tell people to get the vaccine so Nick can tell them not to get it.
All right. Anyway, Jade.
I think public health, they're really strong education campaign. Dr. Anzorg recently published like a list of myths and debunked them all about, some misconceptions that people have about the vaccine. I've seen even like restaurants, Krispy Kreme, if you bring in your vaccine card, you can get a free donut every day for the rest of the year. So I think honestly, that would get me vaccinated if I was hesitant. So.
We don't have any Krispy Kremes.
We don't. Well, that's yeah. And the other thing,
we need to do the show on location in Oxnard next week, Jerry. I mean, because I'm getting my Krispy Kreme.
Good idea. But the other, the sign of the times we live in, they can't even do a nice thing like give you a donut. They're getting creamed, so to speak, on Twitter because having a donut every day is not healthy. So all of the food Nazis are now on Krispy Kreme for giving away free donuts. But then the fat shaming people are on the food Nazis against Krispy Kreme. It's just horrible. And you, Jade, I believe, are getting your vaccine, correct?
Yes, on Wednesday. I'm excited.
That is good. Good. And then, so the entire panel, Josh, have you had your second?
I've not had my second dose yet. They say 3 to 6 weeks, so I guess I got a couple weeks before I get notified.
Yeah, Jade got the Johnson & Johnson, or she's getting the Johnson. You should have done that. You should have planned ahead.
Hopefully she has it after the show, because if she has it before the show, that she's going to have those 48-hour side effects they talk about.
I think you should definitely do it right before the show so we could live television. Meltdown. All right, so we see, now watch this transition here. We see a lack of communitarianism and common purpose in the vaccine, but one place there is common purpose in Santa Barbara, Nick, is in the floor area ratio calculations for height limits downtown, and there was a big hearing about that this weekend. You and Josh, I guess, both covered it. Please decipher this for me.
All right. Well, Josh, hold on, Josh. Ready? Remember last week you gave me some grief about my mixed metaphors? All right. So this one is like, Solomon cutting the baby in half. And one half of the baby that the city council is trying to deal with is the urgent, desperate need for affordable rental housing. And there's just absolutely no doubt that's real. And on the other side of the equation is, for 100 years now, people have fought tooth and nail to maintain Santa Barbara as a, whether you think it's faux colonial or not, there's a look to Santa Barbara and an architectural style, and the skylines are protected and it's low slung. And so it's, the height versus housing, and both have powerful constituencies. And so this week, the council tried to cut the baby in half, and they took a bite out of the apple and nearly choked on it. But the way it works is, as usual, is you give the developers massive incentives to build housing and rental housing on State Street, on Chapala Street, on Anacapa Street, downtown, so that they could build something in the order of magnitude 3 times more rental units than they theoretically could under the existing incentive plan. And this program, which is called floor area ratio, known to the inside baseball walks as FARs, as opposed to AUDs, which came before, which, you have these totally impenetrable acronyms, and you're supposed to have an intelligent conversation.
But it means we're going to have this massive skyline rivaling Manhattan's, I take it.
But, again, when you listen to what people were saying and the numbers that went with it, you envision very quickly a skyline of downtown, really 4 stories, maybe 5 stories high, going up to maybe 60 feet, because that's the maximum you can do under the charter. Right now, the current height limit is 48. Former mayor and current city planning commissioner, Sheila Lodge, said, look, if you guys walk up State Street, like I have, from the waterfront to Victoria Street, you will count 12, just 12 buildings over 2 stories. So if all of a sudden you give them cocaine, steroids, and everything else to allow this buildup in hopes of getting affordable rental housing, you're going to see a canyonization effect.
All right, so Josh, break down the sides. Who are the players? Who wants what?
How come you always come to me after Nick goes on for 4 minutes to put it into context?
Well, why are you timing Nick?
Let's start with the inside baseball of Kristen Sneddon versus Megan Harmon.
Now there he goes for another 4 minutes. Come on, Josh.
So obviously the city wants to build, or there's lots of movement toward building housing downtown. And so the city's trying to figure out what's the best way to make it more affordable for developers to build downtown. For a long time, the conversation was about units, size of units. Now the conversation is shifting to size of building. And so that's what they're talking about downtown. They're going to pay a consultant to go look at how big the building should be based off of housing needs of Santa Barbara and what the affordability would be. Councilwoman Kristen Sneddon said, I'm only interested in housing for the workforce. I'm not interested in any other kind of housing. So
that's the so-called missing middle.
80 to 120% of the median income. So that was what her push was. Most people were sort of in agreement there. There was Sheila Lodge, as Nick Welsh said. She called in. She was very articulate on this, saying, we don't want State Street to go too big. In fact, most of State Street is not that big. So that's the discussion. It's going to be an issue right now, particularly with Kristen Sneddon. She's running for re-election. Apparently, Barrett Reed is also running for the seat.
He's a developer.
He's a developer. He's going to get a lot of developer money, and he's going to get the support of those who want to build higher. And so that's what's really sort of at stake here, is size of units shifting to sizes of buildings.
And Barrett Reed's close personal friend, council member Megan Harmon, and her close personal friend, council member Mike Jordan, were against Kristen on this, correct, Nick?
Yeah, they were very, they looked at the numbers that the staff came up with as a starting point. They said, this is a nice start, but it's not nearly big enough. If we want housing, we have to go much bigger. We have to do it much more dramatically. And so to throw out the numbers, the staff was talking about 2.5 or 3. They said we want 4. And when you look at these numbers, a difference between a 3 to a 4 is kind of like the difference between a 3 to a 4 with an earthquake. So there was a lot of push back and forth in terms of which way it was going to go. For a long time, it looked as if Michael Jordan and Megan Harmon were going to have it. Kathy Murillo seemed to be on their side. And it was going to be Eric Friedman and Kristen Sneddon saying, think about the mountain views. And at the last minute, Oscar Gutierrez, who was having technical difficulties with his computer, managed to jump in, and he very quickly made it clear he was with the Mountain View side. Everybody wants housing, everybody wants mountain views, it's just the emphasis. And so this shift went towards that. And so there was a very contentious situation that wound up with a 7-zip vote.
So when they hire this consultant, what are the marching orders? Are the marching orders going to be figure out how we're going to build these 8,000 units that the state says we're supposed to build? Is it going to be make sure that Sheila Lodge is you know, her concerns about more than 2-story buildings are met? I mean, who's going to decide? Gosh, you know?
Well, I think the idea is to get the data and then come back to the council and they're going to decide. I don't think there's an agenda. It's sort of, hey, we want you to look at all of these factors here. What is State Street like? What is affordability like? What is the cost of land? Who are the developers interested in building? And let's figure out what that magic number, that FAR that Nick Welsh was referring to. Is it 3? Is it 4? What is it? And is
that the number of stories, the FAR number?
No, it's the size of the building, depending on the size of the overall lot.
All right. So, hey, Jade, you mentioned that you had been interviewing architects for a different but somewhat related story. What are you hearing?
Yeah, so some people from the AIA community reached out to me about the city holding design contests or design competitions for city projects. And the Ortega Park project was what kind of inspired the idea, because she said a lot of people were unhappy and they didn't do a great job with the mural like people wanted. So essentially, it's the idea that the city would, here's this project, here's your budget, give us some designs, and it'd just be a competition as a way to kind of facilitate more community involvement and get concrete ideas from the community, instead of what the architect told me is that the city asks the community's opinion, but doesn't do much else with it after that.
So sort of front loading the process more with what it would actually look like. And then you had another piece from out of the county about new ADUs, correct? Or new regulations for ADUs, which is again related to this whole housing discussion. What's the change?
So essentially state laws in 2020 went into effect that would make the county's existing ADU laws null and void. And so in 2021, there was new state laws that kind of clarified that. And so most of the proposed amendments were just aligning the county's ADU laws with the new state legislation. To be honest,
does it make it easy? It makes it easier for someone who wants to convert or build an ADU?
Yeah, there's less development standards, and they reduced the permitting process time frame from 120 days to 60 days. So it's supposed to kind of speed it up and give
but not in the city, I'm sure. Only in all right, Josh. So you need to put together a piece connecting the FAR with the ADU and the AUD as AUD. Well. Huh? Yeah.
ADU and AUD.
Yeah, we just tie it all together, Josh.
Don't forget the HLC. Come on.
Well, everyone else seems to have forgotten the HLC. Yeah. Okay. All right. Meanwhile, we have this election going on, and the Democratic Party decided to do their usual early endorsements. And Josh, I guess they feel like 10 years of Kathy Murillo is not enough. We need 5 more. How did the endorsements go down?
Well, the more things change, the more they stay the same, Jerry. The Democratic Party has endorsed Kathy Murillo for mayor. This is the 4th time they've endorsed her, twice for city council, twice for mayor. They had their central committee meeting, and they interviewed all the candidates, and she won with a majority of the vote. I've heard 70% of the vote.
You needed what, 60 to get the endorsement? 60% of those present and voted.
Yeah, and so she was going up against James Joyce. She was going up against Deborah Schwartz. They all interviewed. I got to say, Kathy interviewed really well. She does really well when it's scripted and she's presenting her talking points. maybe it's her theater background. She did really well. She went through her talking points of everything the city has done over the past 4 years. So she won that very clearly, but the fix was in. It was very clear she was going to get the endorsement from the get-go. They like her. She's a loyal Democratic Party a person. She campaigns for Democratic Party candidates. She works hard to get them elected. She gives her time, and that's really what the party values. They value, have you been involved from the beginning, or are you just coming to us now because you want our support? James Joyce interviewed, he failed to articulate why he's different. In fact, it was a theme throughout. About the most specific thing he could say was tone. There needs to be a change in tone on the city council. He said he's somebody that has ability to have difficult conversations and bring people together. That wasn't really enough for people to say, why should we get rid of our endorsement for this progressive Democratic candidate or this mayor incumbent and go with somebody else? So he failed to make the argument. And that's kind of poli-sci 101 is, if I want to take your spot, Jerry, I've got to make the case for why.
Well, you do it every week, Josh. I got to say.
For why I am better than you. Yes. I can't just say, oh, well, I'll be good too. Okay. And he didn't really
how about
do
Deborah? How did Deborah do?
Deborah was Deborah. That's about as nice as I can say it. Deborah was full of facts. She was full of detail and information. She said that there's a layer of sort of uncivility on the city council. She said that we need an extraordinary leader, not an ordinary leader. But again, it's all sort of just like talking. There's very little like emotional engagement with what Deborah Schwartz says. And you're trying to move people to take their endorsement from one person to another who's been very in the trenches for their causes. You've got to do more than just have a list of talking points. So she was just Deborah. She just listed all of the reasons why, and it was what it was. She didn't really have the best of answers. There was really no chance she was going to get
at least she's making a case, as you point out. You can't beat somebody with nobody. And what I have heard repeatedly with James, he's just kind of reciting his resume. He's not really saying, this is what's wrong, and here's how I'm going to fix it, and here's how that's going to look. And
if I were James's campaign manager, and I'm not, and I'm a journalist, I don't really care who wins. I'm going to report on whoever is the mayor. But James needs to be more specific. He needs to say, these are the 3 things that I'm going to change when I get into Santa Barbara City Hall. And the first thing is, I'm going to stop any bickering and any infighting publicly, because I'm going to make sure that we're all on the same page, because I'm a leader and I've had difficult conversations working for Hannah Beth Jackson, as well as in my own private enterprise. He needs to articulate 1, 2, 3, instead of just saying, I've done this and I'm a former journalist and I worked for Hannah Beth. He's got to do more than that if he expects to gain any traction. This is not about qualifications, right? Dan Secord used to say the landscape is littered with politicians who thought they would be okay. It is not about qualifications to get elected. It is about connection.
Getting elected. And
it's
Kathy,
about connection.
Kathy
does gotta connect.
She does very well campaigning. She's done much better in campaigning than in governing, in my view. But seriously, Nick, 15 years of Kathy Murillo, is that we're living through the Kathy Murillo age? Do you think it's ultimately going to come down to her or Randy Rouse?
I have not really gotten with James Joyce to talk with him. I think it's early on in the race. I think that James Joyce knew going into this he wasn't going to win it, and probably, given what he was trying to do, he was.
You mean the endorsement? You mean the endorsement?
The endorsement, yeah. he would consider the endorsement
No, he
perhaps
wanted
a
to block her.
liability.
He wanted to block her.
So you're not going to block Kathy. I mean, she would have. I mean, yes, there was the statement she made on your show, and there was a couple of gaffes, but her relationship with the party goes back, as Josh said, since the Pleistocene.
All right, let me ask you this. So Megan Harmon, who's going to win apparatchik of the year, I mean, she's become the most rabid Democrat since Nancy Pelosi, was endorsed, and Kristen was endorsed as well. But Eric Friedman was not, for the mortal sin of endorsing his mother running for city college board.
If Bill Clinton got in trouble for lying about having oral sex, a lot of people think you should be allowed to lie about that. That's not something you can be held up on perjury charge. Certainly endorsing your mom, you just get a pass. You just get it. It's just.
Except you don't with the young Democrats, apparently.
What I heard is that Jonathan Abboud in particular was outraged. I don't know that he was even a voting member last night.
And Jonathan Abboud is very close to his mother. We saw it in the assembly race. I don't understand the problem of endorsing your mom. I really don't.
Well, because Celeste Barber has sort of become sort of a Fox News darling for the 5 seconds when she held up the American flag at a school board meeting, and
but it's his mother. I mean,
I know. I just think it was crazy. I mean, Eric Friedman is a good, moderate, thoughtful, middle of the road Democrat, and you get a pass for your mom. Period.
Oh.
So they asked him that question, one of the members, and how could he support his mother and give money to a candidate and also support, and that candidate happens to be your mother, and they brought up the City College incident with her saying the Pledge of Allegiance, and he had a good answer. He said, Eric Friedman said he knows all of his mother, not just her in these moments, and he cited some things that she has done over the years that have been very thoughtful and considerate, and he articulated that whole message and the whole picture of who his mother is. And because that question took so long, they ran out of time, and they're going to come back and meet with Eric again before deciding whether to do an endorsement. But I mean, I think, come on, it's your mother. Are we really living in an era where we're held accountable for what our relatives do?
Yes, apparently we are.
That's very immature.
All right, Jade. So speaking of Jonathan Abboud, who represents Isla Vista area on the City College Board, Deltopia is coming up in Isla Vista. You wrote about it, but I'm scratching my head because your story said it's either April 3rd or it's April 10th. But why don't? Come on, I'm ready to go. Why can't I know when it is? I'm too old.
From my professional college student opinion, it's April 3rd. It's always the weekend after everyone gets back from spring break.
We're here first. Okay.
But I think just maybe because of COVID, the city is unsure of when it could happen. So they're going to take precautions for both weekends. But if things are happening, it's going to be tomorrow and Sunday.
But you can't get to the beach, right? They're putting gates on the beach?
Yeah, so the beaches are closed. All the university-owned housing along El Colegio is fenced off. There's a 6 p.m. noise ordinance also, the typical Halloween Deltopia restrictions.
Do you have fond memories of Deltopia from your own undergraduate years, Jade?
Some memories, yes. My freshman year of college, my stepmom and my 3-year-old sisters were visiting, and they were just like, JD, why is everyone walking around naked and they can't walk straight? It's like, I'm sorry, let's go to the zoo.
Nick, you're so old. They used to call it Floatopia when you were attending, I think.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Also vaguely, Josh, you're going to be out there with the kids this weekend on April.
No, I'm gonna be in Dalligara Plaza covering a vigil for a person who was deported during the Trump administration, and whose son is a member of the U.S. Marines. So I'm going to be covering a vigil and writing a news story, because the work never stops for us journalists, Jerry. All
right. But Jade, what are you working on beside this architecture piece? You got anything good coming you can share with us?
I have a film festival next week, so I'm covering some of those awards. The one I'm most excited about, the Sacha Baron Cohen one. I think that'll be interesting. The Board of Supervisors is finally back next week, so I think they're gonna do the census count wrap up finally.
So how are they gonna do that? We don't have the numbers, right?
Yeah, it's the estimated time slot is 30 minutes, so I'm not too sure what they're gonna say, but we'll see.
And you have a top secret piece coming that you can't tell us anything about, Nick. Is that right?
I can't tell you. I haven't written it yet, and I'm really behind. And yeah, but it's going to be a good one.
Is this going to be involving deconstructing someone else's story or your own story, Nick?
This is my own story.
Uh-oh. And is it a poodle or is it a...
No, this is a news story profile. It touches on COVID and COVID resistance.
Okay.
I can't wait.
All right. Well, Josh, who you got on a podcast?
Well, unlike you, Jerry, I tie my podcast to the news. So I will be having none other than Eric Friedman, hot off the presses of not getting the endorsement. And we're going to make it a little more lively than your conversation.
I had Eric Friedman. I made news with Eric Friedman. Don't even start with me there.
Okay, well, we're going to make new news.
Huh?
We're going to make new news. How about that?
All right, make new news. All right. Thank you all, Jade, Josh, and Nick. And stay safe out there. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time on Newsmakers.
See you guys later.
All right, bye.